What's up, everyone? Kyle here. I am super excited to share that my audiobook version of Travel Tips is up now. You can find it on Audible, Libro.fm, and anywhere else that you get your podcasts. Go check it out and buy a copy. It also has 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes of bonus commentary that isn't in the actual book, so that's a little added bonus. But go check it out. I appreciate all the support, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode. All right, welcome everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm your host, Kyle Rasmussen, and today I have with me Tami, who is an avid backpacker and adventurer. Tami, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, super excited. I've been looking at your Instagram and some other pages that you got on here, and just amazing backpacking pictures. So I'm really excited to hear about some of these stories today.
Awesome. I'm excited to tell them.
Yeah, well, so I know we mentioned before we hopped on here that that you've only been backpacking for a few years. So tell me how you got into backpacking.
Well, years ago, we're talking like 30 years ago, my husband and I went backpacking in Missouri, and we made it 2 nights before we heard wolves all night howling, and we had our dogs with us. And so it kind of was the end of it after we spent about $1,000 on gear at REI. But fast forward, my husband was in the military, so we traveled a lot. I had 3 kids. Kind of life just gets in the way, and I wasn't really able to have much time to do things. And in 2021, during COVID, my oldest daughter, who was 25 at the time, invited me to go with her on a backpacking trip up to Idaho and Montana. And the rest is kind of history. I kind of got hooked and bought so much gear and rebought so much gear and rebought so much gear to go more ultralight. But that was the beginnings of it for me. And I've been all over the place since.
Yeah, what's been some of your recent hikes that you've enjoyed?
Well, last year I set my goals on the John Muir Trail and Mount Whitney and did that in about 3 weeks. I recently did the Appalachian Trail about 2 months ago in the Shenandoah section in Virginia, which was really interesting. Definitely different terrain than the John Muir Trail and the Sierras, but beautiful and lush in its own way, for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I've heard that hiking on the East Coast is a lot different than on the West Coast.
So different. So different, wet, rainy. We did experience some rain on the John Muir Trail, but it was few and far between. We ended up having to get off the Appalachian Trail on the last day because the temperature dropped to about 45
Oh
and it was
wow.
pouring rain. Our feet were soaked. As a matter of fact, my feet are still peeling 2 months later.
Oh no.
And that's just something that happens when your feet get wet. Apparently, it was close to trench foot, which is a really
Oh,
scary
geez.
thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. It's kind of interesting seeing the different terrain. I would think that like up here in Washington where I'm at, I would think, that would be more of a concern up there versus the East Coast, because it's wet a lot of the year up in
Right.
Washington and in the high mountains,
Yeah,
on the
for
West
sure.
Coast. But that's fascinating. So I saw here on your Instagram that you did the Mount Whitney portal. It said 220 miles that you hiked.
Yeah. Yes. So the John Muir Trail runs about 211 miles, and you can go either northbound or southbound. I was lucky enough to score a golden ticket, which is out of Happy Isles in Yosemite, and it goes all the way to Whitney Portal. And you can choose to do Mount Whitney in the end. Most people do. But given the altitude challenges, some people decide not to do it.
Mhm.
It was number one on my list once I started backpacking. I decided I was going to do it no matter what. And that was that. We ended up doing it. Let's see, it was about 21 days I was on trail, starting out at Happy Isles. It's a beautiful terrain in the Sierras. I don't know. I haven't been up to Washington yet, but I've heard it's just as spectacular. But it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
What was that like being out there for 3 weeks?
Well, it was interesting. I started the trail with one of my tennis partners, and she's a pretty avid backpacker also, and ended up on day, I believe it was day 12, she got a tooth infection and she had to leave the trail. But lucky for me, on day 3 in Tuolumne Meadows, we met up with another backpacker who was solo, and she and I ended up summiting Mount Whitney together on the last day. So I
Wow.
was really lucky to have found someone else, because I think I probably would have gotten off trail at that point if I was solo. I don't know that I'm meant to be a solo backpacker for that long of time, because 3 weeks away from my family was really hard for me. Grateful for a Garmin to keep, in touch with my family and such, but it's just not the same when you're out there fighting it every day, doing
Mhm.
about 6,000 elevation gain and loss. It was a lot of climbing, a lot of descending, and beautiful though. I mean, honestly, some days I just cried at the beautiful terrain and the things we saw. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean it looks stunning from the pictures that you took, but yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, all the elevation gain and loss, that's pretty hard terrain out there.
Yeah, for
to
sure.
be-
I think in the end, I think my Garmin tracked 70,000 feet elevation gain and loss,
Oh my gosh.
which is insane. Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty insane. But, for me, that was like my biggest backpacking trip I've done. Prior to that, I did the Trans Catalina Trail in March to kind of see if it was something that I would want to do. And that was about 5 days on trail, about 45 miles, something like that. And I was hooked. I was sure I was going to do the John Muir Trail no matter what. And things just fell into place, fortunately for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And I have to say, in your video, that was probably the biggest pancake I've ever seen in my life.
Right? Honestly, you know what? I've got to take my son back to college in a couple days. He goes to school down in LA, and I'm going to come up and stop at the Whitney portal and get a pancake just to relive the old memories. And I'm going to do some dispersed camping at Alabama Hills just to see Whitney with snow in all its glory. So I'm going to stop by and grab another pancake.
Yeah, that's funny. So yeah, what kind of gear, does it take to be out there for 21 days straight?
Well, the lightest gear you can possibly get,
Yeah.
which was one of those things when I dropped $700 on a single tiny tent that we jokingly call Ziploc. Uh, my husband was like, "Wait, what? You already have two tents." And I was like, "I know, but I need an 18-ounce tent." So my tent has no like real doors on it. It does zip and it has mesh, but it is the lightest tent you can find, except that it does, the condensation when it rains, you definitely get wet. but
Uh,
but being out there for 3 weeks, I mean, everything has to be as ultralight as it can. I have bad knees, and going into John Muir Trail, I was um, probably closer to a knee replacement than I thought I was. And I had to make sure my weight was, sub 12 pounds for my base weight. And so the lighter you go, the more expensive it costs.
mhm.
But definitely my backpack, my sleeping quilt weighs 18 ounces. Everything is super ultralight, and that allows me to be out there with bad knees. So yeah, definitely a huge investment to do something like that.
Yeah. Did you go stop to like refill anywhere, like, get new snacks, food, that sort of thing, or did you just have, your food for the 3 weeks the entire time?
Yes. So backpacking in the Sierras, you definitely have to carry a bear canister with you. So I carry a barricade weekender, which really is technically for two people to do a weekend trip, but I can get 10 to 12 days of food in my weekender just by really
Wow.
doing a good job packing. Everything is mostly freeze dried. I have just started making my own backpacking food just because I'm so picky about taste and what goes in things. And I have a mushroom allergy, so I have to be really careful because there's a lot of mushroom extract in a lot of foods these days. So I have
Mhm.
to be really careful. Um, as far as it goes, we did two resupplies. One resupply was at Red's Meadow, which was about 7 days, I believe, into it. And then we had another resupply at 5 days after that. And
Okay.
once we hit the second resupply, which was at MTR, we shipped a bucket down there. It's a fascinating process. You take a Home Depot, giant 5-gallon bucket and you throw all your food in there in hopes that that's something you like to eat. And and you ship it off about a month prior to going. And we actually had friends meet up with us at Red's Meadow for our first resupply. The second resupply came as a bucket. And then we were originally going to have a resupply over Kearsarge Pass, which was technically about 5 days or 4 days before we summited Whitney. But my friend who was going to have her husband resupply us went off trail. So we were kind of in a pickle there with 10 days of food, but we made it work. Actually, I found a bunch of food in bear bins along the way. So I
Uh,
literally trolled through food. We found packages of Oreos, we found tuna packets, and fortunately, I didn't get sick. I don't know how long those things were in the bear bin, but it got to the point where people were offering food because once you get to a point where you're like 4 days out or 3 days out to Whitney and you're carrying extra food, people are more than happy to share their food. So I kind of was in a bit of a pickle there on, the last day I had one meal left and I saved up my meal for the night before we summited. And yeah, it was kind of crazy. Ran out of food, but that's just the way it goes. Sometimes you're over food, sometimes you're under. You're very rarely right
mhm.
on about your food.
Yeah, yeah. What was it like summiting Mount Whitney?
Well, interestingly enough, I'm terrified of heights. Okay. I'm going to throw that in first. I'm 51. So as I've gotten older, the more fear of things has gotten more prevalent for me. Um, the interesting part about it all also is that I have altitude sickness. So I
Mm.
spent about six weeks prior to our trip in Lake Tahoe in Desolation Wilderness, getting prepared for altitude. So I would go up there and spend about 3 days backpacking, slowly trickling up to where I spent a week in Mammoth at about 9,500 feet and slowly acclimated myself to being able to do this. So I took Diamox, which is a altitude sickness medication, and then by the time I got to Whitney, I was able to not use the medication. But summiting Mount Whitney, we started off at 1 a.m. because we had the goal of a sunrise summit, which
Wow.
isn't really easy for anyone. You definitely, if you're doing Mount Whitney in a day with a day permit, there's no way because you leave around midnight. Maybe you summit around 11 o'clock in the morning or so because it's like a 22-mile from the portal up and the portal back. But for us, we got to come from Guitar Lake, which was about 4.5 miles, I think, from the summit. And so we spent the night at Guitar Lake, got up at 1 a.m., started climbing around 1:30, I think it was, with our headlamps. And fortunately for me, I didn't have to see how high up we were. So my fear of heights was mostly just limited to what my headlamp could see. There were a couple times I will say as we got closer to the top after Trail Crest, where I took a step and recognized that the next step, if I kept going in that direction, would have been off the cliff.
Oh
So
gosh.
definitely there were parts of the trail that were very narrow and places where you could just put a shoe and kind of go through as if you're on, like a balance beam. There were some
Yeah.
parts of it that were really sketchy. But we had done so many passes up to that point that it wasn't a scary thing for me.
Mhm.
And we got up to the summit, I want to say around 5:30. And once we were up on the summit, we had cell service for the first time in 10 days. So I was able to actually FaceTime my husband and we watched the sunrise together, which was
Oh
one of the
wow.
coolest things ever. Yeah. But it was definitely really cold up there. I want to say it was probably about 28 degrees. And so we were huddled in sleeping bags and quilts to try to stay warm. There were probably about maybe 8 other people up there with us for the sunrise that day. It was August 27th, 2022.
Wow, that's amazing. I can't imagine trying to hike up, that mountain in the dark for many hours, and especially being scared of heights and everything. But I
Yeah,
imagine
it
it was
was
so
actually
worth
a
it.
good thing because, you just don't realize when you get close up to the summit, there are these famous windows. They're called Whitney windows, and it's kind of fascinating. It's an opening in the rock, and I believe there are three of them. So as you pass by these windows, it was still dark, but you could see the town of Lone Pine below you with the
Mm.
lights. And I'm not really sure. I want to say Lone Pine is probably resting around 7,000 feet. I could be really wrong, but Whitney is 14,005. So you're looking up. You're probably about 6,000 feet below you, looking at the lights in the town, which was really one of the coolest things ever. I have a couple pictures of me in the windows on my Instagram, thanks to my amazing trail sister Jenna, who's a photographer. I was so lucky to end up with someone who's an adventure photographer, and so that's how we ended up with all those beautiful pictures.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty fascinating, but the windows are really cool. Even some people only make it up to the windows, and it's just a beautiful view even from there.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds like everything just worked out perfectly to make it all happen and make the trip a success.
It did. I definitely started struggling, I want to say about 13,000 feet. Once we hit about 13.5, every 100 feet or so up in elevation, I would get dizzy. And so I'd stop
Mm.
for a minute. It took us about 4.5 hours to get up there. Just, those last probably 1,500 feet were tough.
Hmm.
But somehow I adjusted to it. I was a little out of it when we summited and didn't, it's one of those things where you are so in shock that something that you worked so hard. I mean, I spent a year working on that, trying to get, acclimated to elevation, backpacking, being strong enough to carry 20 pounds, 25 pounds with food and water, and it all comes together in that moment, and I think I was in total shock until we started on the way down, and then it hit me, and it was a really cool event because you don't I guess I didn't realize it as we were descending, how many people were coming up with day packs. Like, I wasn't even paying attention to it, but here we are with these giant packs, right? And we're
Mhm.
descending down. I didn't realize that people realized what we had done, and so every time we'd pass people, they'd be like, "Congratulations, you did it." And we were just like, "What?" Such a surreal experience to come down out of there knowing what you had done. And we were rushing because we were trying to make it to the pancake. Pancake, the pancake breakfast cuts off at 11 o'clock, but
Oh.
fortunately for us, my friend Nicole, who I started JMT with, my tennis partner, she met us at the portal, minus a tooth. at that point because she had to go home and get her tooth pulled and
Hmm.
deal with all that. But she came and met us and she got the pancake for us. So we actually didn't get down to the portal, I want to say, until almost 1:45, I think it was. So it took us that long to descend down from the summit. We ended up leaving the summit, I want to say, around 7:30. So it took us, God,
Okay.
6 hours, but we really basked in it. It was beautiful. We met some other hikers, backpackers going down, and we all just kind of came through the portal together. It was a beautiful experience, like a finish line.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's something that you can just have forever and say that, yeah, I did that.
Yeah, I will say I don't know if I'll do it again, but I'm very pulled to see Whitney. And I'm excited to see Whitney in a couple days just to kind of bask in it and look at it and enjoy the majesty of it all. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to say I did it. Some days I wake up and I still can't believe it happened the way it did. So everything fell together and it just was amazing despite my altitude issues and my fear of heights. I kind of got over it a little bit, but it definitely I struggle with vertigo in daily life. So
Mhm.
it was one of those things that I was grateful that I could conquer through and get through a lot of, fears as well.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, what a huge accomplishment.
Yeah,
Do you
thank
have any other mountains or major trails that you're looking to traverse?
Well, after doing the AT, I recognize that I definitely want to go up to Vermont and do White Mountain, that part of the Appalachian Trail. And I definitely want to get up to Washington and do some more, some backpacking up there for sure. I've been asked a couple times to go up there, and it's just been at the wrong times. Permits are really hard to get. And
Hmm.
so I'm also looking, I'd like to go do Mont Blanc, the Tour de Mont Blanc.
Okay.
Yeah, over in Europe. But for now, I just have some camping trips lined up for this year. And my husband and I are going to do a bunch of traveling, hopefully over to Europe at the end of the year. So nothing huge planned, but last year was my big year.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of planning and research went into that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it took probably 6 months to figure out how to, register for the permits, how to pack for things. I had never done 3 weeks of backpacking and what that would look like, and making sure you brought everything you needed, things that you didn't need. And fortunately, I had done so many trips, like up to Desolation Wilderness. I did some backpacking down in Mammoth. And I had narrowed down to the point where I didn't bring anything that I shouldn't have, and I didn't miss anything that I should have brought, you know? So
Mhm.
I actually had it all dialed in by the time I left.
Uh, what was that process like? Like getting the permits, getting all the gear, that sort of thing. Did you just have to do it piece by piece, or was there certain time frames you had to, get permits or things like that?
Well, the permits are really challenging. First of all, the permit that I actually got for two people, I believe Yosemite only gives out 20 per day. So, and there's thousands of people going for it. So I never win anything. So I don't even know how that happened. Well, I will tell you how it happened actually. This is not something I totally would tell people to do, but I had gone down to Yosemite in November with my daughter and went up onto the mist trail, and I grabbed a bunch of leaves. This sounds so weird, but I grabbed a bunch of leaves off the trail and I put them in my pocket. I took them home. I put it in a little dish and I manifested it. And I mean, I don't know. I think I was just lucky, but it was one of those things where I was like, I want to take some of this home with me. I really want this so bad. And I just manifested it all, for 6 months in hopes that I would
Mhm.
get in there. And I believe I went for the permits in March, and then a week later got the results. And it's so funny because when I asked my friend Nicole, I think I was going to get the permits. Well, I got the permits and I was like, hey, so guess what? I got Happy Isles to Whitney. And she's like, oh shit. so so that's kind of, the permits were really fascinating. I had to learn like where to get the permits out of, how to get, like it's tricky. You can get permits out of Happy Isles, but it's a Donahue Pass ineligible. So you can either get an eligible for Donahue Pass or an ineligible for Donahue Pass. And some people get their permits and don't realize that you have to have Donahue eligible, because Donahue is one of the first passes that gets you out of Yosemite and into, I believe it's Inyo National Forest. And it's just doing all the research. It was so much work. There was a Facebook group and I just read everything religiously. There's files in it. It's a John Muir Trail Facebook group. And it was so helpful for me because I would just sit and listen to or read everything about what people were asking questions, and try to get as much knowledge as I could, and had to figure out exactly our mileage, how many miles were we going to do a day. We kind of estimated around 10 miles a day, but some days were like 15-mile days, some days were like 4-mile days. It just depended. Camping sites were really easy to find on JMT, as well as water sources. We had no issues finding water sources while we were there, except for one day we ended up having to do like a 14-mile day. We thought we had a water source at 10 miles, but it was actually at 14 miles. So we had to push on. But as far as permits go, it was pretty straightforward. I would recommend, if anybody's interested in doing it, join one of the Facebook groups. That's one of the reasons I stay on Facebook, is just for the groups and the information that I can find there.
Mhm.
As far as gear goes, I started out with basic gear, went to REI, bought stuff, and fortunately for me, I went through 4 pads before I found it, and REI is really good about that. If you purchase something and it just doesn't work out, they're really have a great return policy. So it took me 4 sleeping pads to get to where it was going to be acceptable, but
Yeah, that's
eventually,
important.
in the end, I ended up buying most of my gear through private companies, small companies that make backpacks, small companies that make tents. I kind of like supporting small business anyway. But, basic things I can get through REI, as far as food, dehydrated food, and, small things like headlamps and things like that, I get through REI. But as far as the regular gear, I like to buy from small companies, and I still do. I've changed my backpack twice now. But most everything I have is dialed in and I'm ready to go on a month-long backpacking trip right now if I need to, with ultra lightweight. So my gear is pretty much dialed in to what I need.
Yeah, that's good. I can imagine just that first initial getting all the gear is a lot of work, but once you have it, I feel like it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it was so much work. It probably took me about a year of planning that. And I still have some of my older tents, and those tents go with me when I do car camping or
Mhm.
sorry, regular camping, not backpacking. But I have a whole backpacking kit, and then I have a car camping kit, which is, all the heavier gear, the nice, plush thermarest pad. But those things weigh way more than I want to carry on a trail
Mhm.
backpack. So but yeah, it definitely was a process to get what I needed for for my needs. I'm in my 50s, so sleep is really important to me. And sleeping on a ground is not easy. So it definitely took some time getting adjusted and getting things to what I needed. I still just bought a brand new pillow on the Appalachian Trail, and I probably own 6 or 7 pillows, some inflatable, some not, and it's just one of those things that just is a never-ending process
Uh-huh.
to make your sleep comfortable while you're on the trail.
Yeah, yeah, well that's important. Did you have any major issues along the way? Like any issues with bears or anything?
The crazy thing on the John Muir Trail is everybody is like, oh, I'm so scared of bears. We, as a group, saw no bears. I had one day that I was lagging behind, and we were coming up out of Red's Meadow, and it was a big climb day. I want to say it was like we had like a 4,000-foot climb that day over the course of like it was like 13 miles. I want to say it was a long day. And I was just crying the whole way. I mean, that just happens. Some days you just cry. Some days suck more than others.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like, it was kind of a type 2 fun kind of day. I don't know if you know what type 2 fun is. It's that kind of fun that is not fun in the moment, but you look back on it, you're like, huh, that was actually kind of fun. But I cried the whole way up the mountain that day, and I just happened to look over, and we were going through an area that was very lush. It had creeks running through it, and I saw mama bear and a cub. And it was in the distance, so I couldn't even, there was way too far to even get a picture. But crazy for us, we didn't encounter any bears on the John Muir Trail. Honestly, the most bears I've ever seen are literally in town in Lake Tahoe and in town in Mammoth. The bears are like coming out of the woods for the towns to get food and rummage
Yeah.
through. But I mean, definitely we didn't have any issues with animals. I'm really a stickler for using a bear can.
Mm.
And I actually use a bear can anywhere I go. Even when I hike on the coast, I like to hike out of Bodega Bay a lot and do coastal camping. And I always carry my bear bin. It's ultralight, so it weighs like a pound. And I don't even think anything of it because it's sealed off. The mice can't get to it. None of the rodents can get into it. Bugs can't get into it. And I don't mind carrying it. So I know some people are kind of weird about bear canisters, but for me, I went ultralight from the beginning, and I carry it with me all the time. As far as any incidents, we really didn't. I mean, we had some higher crossings, water crossings, which I can't even imagine what this is going to be like this year. I know a lot of PCT hikers are going around everything. So
Mhm.
the John Muir Trail is about 150 miles PCT shared trail. So the Pacific Crest Trail and the John Muir Trail are shared for those 150 miles. And I know a lot of the PCT hikers are going around like Evolution Creek, which was up to our thighs when we went across it. So you kind of have to prepare for water crossings. We didn't have anything crazy. We went in August. So August seems to be like the prime time to do the Sierras, honestly. August, September. I will say we summited Mount Whitney August 27th, and a week later it snowed up there. So we made it just in the window of not dealing with any snow or anything up on the passes or ice or anything like that. We had generally pretty good weather. So I've not had any crazy encounters. We did encounter a snake on the Appalachian Trail that wouldn't get off trail, and I'm terrified of snakes. um, Fortunately, I was hiking with my friend Jenna, who we summited Whitney together and did John Muir Trail with together. She was living in Virginia over these past 2 years. And so we ended up doing Appalachian Trail, and she's not afraid of snakes. So she tapped it along. I'm the spider person and the bug person. I'll move anything along, but the snake I will not touch. I would rather run back and sit for a mile and stay away from it. But fortunately, I've done a lot of hiking in Arizona also, and here in California. I have not encountered many rattlesnakes. I am calling that luck, and hopefully it stays that way. But we didn't have any major issues other than me losing my partner to a tooth infection, and she
Mhm.
had to get off trail. That was a hard thing. But yeah, fortunately, we hadn't any many major issues. We definitely saw a lot of marmots, and they try to steal your food, and squirrels and chipmunks and all of that. But if you use a bear canister, you don't have many issues.
Yeah, that's good. I didn't realize that the bear canisters were so light that you could take. take with you
Well,
very easily.
some of them are. And actually, the really cool thing I saw, I use a barricade, which is I want to say, I don't know what it's made of, but it's pretty durable. And it weighs about a pound. I paid a lot of money for it. It was almost $400. But as opposed to like the other ones that you can get at REI, I think they weigh like 2.5 pounds. Um, for me, weight was such an issue that I needed to keep down on. So it was worth it to buy that. I've used that thing so much. Yeah, I actually take it with me. It fits easily in my backpack. I have no issues. Sometimes when it's out of food or I have less food, I just pack some of my clothes in there because I know they're not going to get wet that way.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that's smart.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that again, it sounds like everything worked out pretty amazing to make it happen and make it a great trip.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have a great story about what happened to me after the John Muir
Okay.
Trail.
Yeah.
Well, I had so the thing that really got me into hiking and backpacking was 3 years ago. I was in a tennis match and I tore my ACL and meniscus on the court
Oh no.
and I've played tennis for about 20 years competitively, and it was a whole change for me. I spent the better part of that year rehabbing after that, and about 7 months into it I retore my meniscus in PT and had another surgery. Then 6 months later I had another surgery. So I had a surgery in December going into the trail where I had to have my meniscus completely reset again and was locked in a brace for 6 weeks. So I didn't get out of my brace until January and then had to start training in April. So went into it not knowing how that was going to all work out. Well, on day 18 of JMT, I dislocated my knee, hopping some rocks.
Oh no.
And I had to bang it up against a boulder to get back into
Oh my
whatever brace
God.
it had gotten out of. I know, it was really, really crazy. So I was getting through the trail, did the Whitney Summit. I was taking so much I was I actually had to take my prednisone that was made for summiting Whitney to keep from, my knee swelling up so much. So literally I come off the trail and 2 days later I can't even walk. So ended up a month after summiting getting a knee replacement, which was pretty insane. And I'm 9 months out tomorrow. It's been a real process. Definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. I would summit Whitney 4 times over. I would give birth to my children 4 times over. Knee replacements are not easy. And so I'm still recovering, but I started back hiking. So I had my replacement in October, and then I did my first backpacking trip to the Grand Canyon in February. So kind of bounced back pretty quick. Did about 25 miles, I think it was, going into Havasupai in February. And that was my first trip back this year. So I've been doing little backpacking trips here and there. And then the AT, we did 10 miles or 10 days on the AT, did about a little over 100 miles on that. But yeah, it was quite the experience to go from climbing a mountain to not being able to walk for
Yeah.
a couple months.
Uh, that has to be maddening too, just not being able to do anything.
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, basically, I'm recovering out of surgery, and I get all the pictures from Jenna, who's an amazing photographer. She does elopement and wedding photography, but she's also really amazing at landscape photography. And so I'm literally driving home from the hospital after the surgery, and she blew me up with all the photos of our summit and everything. It was just an amazing experience. So I basically put that in a frame next to my bed and looked at that for weeks on end, trying to remind myself that I can get back. And I have, and I know I can. So it's just been a challenge. It's a hard process.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll work out for the best. I know my mom had a knee replacement too, and the same thing. It was a long recovery, but she seems to be better than ever before now too.
Yes, I'm getting there. I'm actually just started playing tennis again and enjoying paddleboarding again. So yeah, it's been a process for sure. I can totally relate. It's tough.
Yeah. Um, well, any other travel or adventure stories that you want to share with the listeners?
Oh, I just recently, this is kind of funny because people ask me all the time. You won't see many pictures of my husband on my Instagram. Um, we just recently went to Tahiti,
Oh
and it was
wow.
a trip that I had dreamed of for a long time. Wanted to go to Bora Bora. Well, on our way there, well, we went to Tahiti, then we took a ferry over to Moorea. Have you heard of Moorea? Have you been to Moorea?
I don't think so.
Oh my goodness. So it's the luscious island I've ever seen. We ended up going hiking and I talked him into going hiking with me. He's really, had a busy few years with work, so he hasn't had a chance to do that. So we went hiking in Morea and we're going along and I didn't realize it, but he was recording me as, as we're hiking up to the top of this mountain. And I went to like go over this and I was like, why were you recording me? And he's like, well, I was just so proud of you. Like you were doing so good and you were like climbing over these trees. And all of a sudden I climbed over a tree, grabbed a branch, lost my footing, lost everything, and face planted into a trunk.
Oh no.
He got it all on video is the funniest thing. But I will say there is, if you ever want to do some beautiful hiking, Moray is the place to go. It's absolutely stunning. It's an island. It's about a 45-minute ferry ride from the main island of Tahiti, and probably about an hour flight from Bora Bora if you ever make it that way. We ended up going to Bora Bora. I told him we weren't going to do anything. We were going to lay around on the beach, and that was not how we did it. We were ATVing up into the mountains. We were jet skiing. We went, snorkeling, and there was never any downtime. I just don't know what that is, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was my vacation slash adventure trip recently this year. But
Hmm.
hopefully I can get him into hiking with me more and possibly backpacking. We'll see.
Yeah, that's funny. I definitely relate to that. You know, in theory, it sounds fun to lay on the beach and just watch the water, but I can't do that in reality. 10 seconds into that, I'm ready to go adventure and,
You're
and go
bouncing,
hiking and
right?
do
Me
whatever.
too. I was like, I think I'm gonna go paddleboarding. Oh, I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna go take the kayak out, laying
Yeah,
there on the beach. I can't sit still either. I'm definitely one of those people that is very hard to keep down.
yeah. Um, so I got to ask, you have in your bio here something about the Her Project. What is that?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, it's very much in the beginnings of launching. A friend of mine, okay, well, here's a story. So, I have a daughter who's in her 20s who was really, really sick for about 10 years. And we spent a lot of time in the hospital. And in the hospital, I met another mom whose daughter was the same thing and chronically ill for years. And one thing that we recognized while we were living this sort of life, how hard it is to find time for yourself, and how little time you take for yourself. And I honestly am definitely looking back on it, quite I was quite the martyr when I was a mom of not taking time for myself. I think the younger generation these days is so much better at self-care and self-love and taking time for themselves. I just didn't give myself the grace for something like that. And together we started backpacking a couple years ago. And the idea of it is, HER stands for Healing, Exploring, Rising. And it's a moment of taking the recognition that we all need to take time for ourselves, and we need to make a life for ourselves outside of who we are as a spouse, who we are as a mother, who we are as a caretaker. And her kind of grew from that. And it's still in the beginning process of, the things that we've created, and we have plans to do a backpacking trip for women who have, I guess, survive sort of similar stories as ours. Like maybe something that took a lot of your time. Maybe it's parenthood, or maybe it's a sick child, or something like that, where you redefine who you are and you get to rediscover who you are as a person, as opposed to being someone's mom or someone's caretaker. So
Hmm.
it's kind of a beautiful thing that we've created. We do a lot of backpacking trips together. We do a lot of paddleboarding together. And it's something that I hope shows other women that you can, especially at our age, that you can do these things for yourself and that the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's really inspiring, and it's inspiring to see all that you've done. With all this backpacking and everything. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that would take a lot of inspiration from that and realize that you can do anything that you set your mind to.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that's what, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I do Instagram, is because I was that person 4 years ago that was still struggling to find out who I was. My last child went off to college 2 years ago, and it literally broke me. I wasn't prepared to not be a mom like that anymore. And I'd spent 25 years as a mom and a military spouse and doing everything around the house. And then all of a sudden it was like I had all this time to myself and I didn't know what to do with it. And for me, that's my thing about Instagram, is sharing that, there is a life outside of being a mom. There is a life outside of being a spouse. And I found it, and it's such a beautiful thing for me that that's why I share it. I mean, I definitely don't share it for any accolades or anything like that. It's to show other women who are in my shoes, like moms. I have so many friends whose kids are going off to college, and it's a hard thing to do as a mom. Is,
Mhm.
you put all your energy and time into kids and they don't need you anymore, and it's
Yeah.
time for you to find who you are. And that's kind of what I've been doing this last year, really focusing on myself. um, a lot of self-healing, a lot of inner child coming out, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I love to see that. Um, yeah, well, I can say as an adult now and everything, I still need my mom sometimes. It's always nice
Yeah.
to have her to bounce things off of sometimes and be there when we
Yeah, that's
too.
so true, because the relationship changes so much when you're an adult.
Hmm.
And it's a great, I mean, I've loved every stage of my kids. But I do enjoy this adulthood and watching them find their way and watching them find, their passions. And it's been beautiful to watch. But I also had to find my own passions too,
Yeah.
and find what I really wanted to do, because I think I gave so much of myself that if we don't fill our own cup, how can we fill other people's cup?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Tammy, any other stories that you want to share or advice for people or anything?
I would have to say get out there. I mean, hiking doesn't have to be backpacking. Hiking can be a short, flat 2-mile hike that makes you feel good about yourself. Get into nature. Nature is so healing for us. And
Hmm.
if there's anything I want to say, is that, like, you can start small. You don't have to start with the best equipment. You don't have to go spend a ton of money. You just need a pair of tennis shoes. You know, get
Yeah.
on out on the trails, and it's really been a healing thing for me. I enjoy being in nature and taking in the smells, the feels, the sounds. It's definitely something that can change your life, and it has mine for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Like you said, I think there's something so healing and something that as humans we need to do, or that we need to be in nature to like really experience life. I think it's really important to get out there and get reconnected to the earth.
I totally agree. It's free. It costs nothing to get
Yeah.
out there, unless you're at a trailhead and you have to pay $10 to park, but whatever. It's still free. It's still
Mhm.
the cheapest form of therapy you can find.
Yeah, yeah, agreed, agreed. Well, Tammy, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. I've really enjoyed hearing your stories and your experiences traveling and adventuring. And like I said, it's really inspiring to see and makes me want to go, go do the John Muir Trail and do some other incredible hikes out there.
Yes, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions on how to do the permits and gear, anything. I've spent so much time researching. I'm happy to help other people.
Yeah, I love that. Well, really quick, where can people find you online?
I'm on Instagram under Tami on the Trail. It's Tami on the Trail. And I also am beginning the Her project, which is healing.exploring.rising on Instagram. And that is something I do with my friend Laura, and it's been a real blessing. I, yeah, that's basically it. I'm mostly on Instagram. I do have a Facebook page under Tami on the Trail, but I'm not on there as much as I am on Instagram.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I definitely recommend people go check out the Instagram. Like I said, you got great pictures on there. Well worth it to check out for sure. But Tammy, thanks again for taking the time, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere around the world soon.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always check out every episode on Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, and now Amazon Music as well. Just search for Our Travel Experiences on any of those platforms and it will pop up. You can also find everything all in one place on my website, ourtravelexp.com. And if you want to see my travel pictures as well as travel pictures from guests on the show, you can check them out on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. And if you want to share your own pictures on the Instagram page or be a guest on the podcast, you can message me via that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to see your pictures and hear about your travel experiences, so please send them my way. And if that isn't enough for you, make sure to check out my weekly YouTube show, From Around the World Fridays. Every Friday, I'm taking 5 to 10 minutes to answer questions from listeners, share some souvenirs that I bought over the years, share my postcards over the years that I've accumulated, or share videos and pictures from one particular city or country that I visited, and so much more. So check it out, guys. You won't be disappointed. And make sure you go subscribe to that as well. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you somewhere around the world soon.